There are countless ways Britons quietly ruin a simple cup of tea before it ever reaches their lips, from how the milk is added to how long the bag is left sitting in the mug. The problem is, those small habits completely change what happens inside the cup. And because tea feels so routine, most people assume they're doing it correctly. But tea is more sensitive than people realize. Temperature shifts matter, timing matters. Even the order of simple steps changes the balance of flavor, bitterness, and texture. What feels like tradition is often just repetition. Today we're breaking down the biggest mistakes every Briton makes when making a cup of tea, and explaining exactly why they happen. And if you stay with us until the end, we'll walk through the proper way to make tea step by step. After that, you may never look at your kettle the same way again. Using water that's too hot or reboiled too many times. For most Britons, making tea begins and ends with the kettle. It's simple. You fill it, switch it on, wait for the click, and pour. Some people even reboil the same water several times throughout the day without thinking twice about it. It feels harmless. After all, it's just water. But this is where the first quiet problem begins. Fresh water contains dissolved oxygen. That oxygen plays an important role in how tea extracts flavor. When water is boiled repeatedly, it loses more and more of that dissolved oxygen. The chemical balance shifts. The water becomes flat, and flat water produces flat tea. Then there's temperature. Many people believe the hotter the water, the better, so the kettle is left to roll aggressively, bubbling hard before being poured straight over the tea bag. What most don't realize is that extremely hot water can shock the leaves. It forces rapid extraction instead of controlled extraction. The result isn't strength, it's imbalance. That's why tea sometimes tastes sharp on the first sip, but hollow seconds later. The color looks deep, so people assume it's strong, but strength isn't the same as flavor. When water is either overheated or oxygen depleted, the tea releases tannins too quickly. That's what creates that dry, slightly bitter edge many people associate with a proper brew. It isn't the tea that's at fault, it's the water that prepared it. And because this mistake happens before anything else, everything that follows has to compensate. People squeeze the bag harder. They leave it in longer, they add more milk. They chase balance that was disrupted from the very beginning. The kettle feels automatic, routine, harmless. But if the water is wrong, the cup never really has a chance. And while water sets the foundation, the next mistake changes the flavour even more dramatically, because it interferes directly with the brewing process itself. Adding milk too early. For many Britons, the milk first or milk last question feels almost cultural. It's something picked up from parents, grandparents, or simply habit. The milk goes into the mug, the tea bag follows, the water is poured. The colour changes, it looks familiar, and the routine feels complete. But tea brewing is a chemical process, not just a tradition. When hot water hits dry tea leaves, extraction begins immediately. Heat pulls flavour compounds, aroma oils, and tannins out of the leaves in stages. Some release quickly, others need sustained heat to fully develop. That sequence is delicate. It depends on temperature staying stable for at least the first minute of brewing. When milk is already in the mug, that stability disappears. Milk is colder than boiling water. The moment the water meets it, the overall temperature drops. It may not seem dramatic, but even a small reduction changes how the leaves behave. Instead of a steady extraction, the process slows. Some flavour compounds dissolve, others remain trapped in the leaf. What you get is colour without depth. Milk also contains proteins, particularly casein, which bind to tannins. That binding is what softens bitterness and gives tea its smoothness when milk is added at the right time. But when milk is present from the beginning, those proteins start interacting with the tea before full extraction has occurred. The balance shifts prematurely. The result is subtle but noticeable. The tea may taste thinner, slightly dull, lacking the rounded body you expect from a proper brew. Many people respond by steeping longer, thinking they need more strength. But longer steeping in lower heat doesn't restore what was lost at the start. It often just introduces a faint bitterness layered over a weak base. Historically, milk first had a practical reason. Fine-boned china could crack under sudden heat. adding milk first helped moderate the temperature. In modern ceramic mugs, that risk is gone, but the habit remains, long after its purpose disappeared. Because tea still changes colour, most people never question the result. But colour isn't flavour. And once the brewing temperature has been compromised, the cup never fully recovers. Even if you get the order right, there's another habit that quietly ruins texture and taste. And it happens in the final seconds before the tea bag leaves the mug. Squeezing the tea bag aggressively, it's one of the most common sights in a British kitchen. The tea has brewed for a minute or two. The colour looks deep enough. So, the spoon goes in. The bag is pressed firmly against the side of the mug. Sometimes it's twisted, sometimes it's squeezed repeatedly, as if extracting every last drop is the responsible thing to do. It feels practical. After all, you paid for that tea bag. Why leave flavour behind? But the instinct to squeeze is usually based on a misunderstanding of how tea actually works. When tea leaves sit in hot water, flavour compounds dissolve gradually. The smoother, aromatic notes come out first. These are what give tea its rounded body and pleasant scent. After that, stronger compounds begin to release. Among them are tannins, natural plant chemicals responsible for structure and slight dryness. Tannins aren't bad. In the right balance, they give tea character, but when too many are released at once, they dominate the cup. That's exactly what squeezing does. Inside the tea bag, the liquid is more concentrated than what's already mixed evenly into your mug. When you press the bag hard, you're forcing that concentrated liquid, rich in tannins, straight into the tea. It hasn't diffused gently. It hasn't balanced out. It hits the cup all at once. The difference is subtle but noticeable. The tea may taste sharper, slightly bitter. You might feel a dry sensation on the sides of your tongue. That's not strength. That's over-extraction. Many people believe squeezing makes the tea richer. In reality, it often makes it harsher while doing very little to improve flavour depth. It increases intensity, not quality. There's another factor most people don't consider. The majority of supermarket tea bags contain finely broken tea particles, sometimes referred to as tea dust. These smaller fragments release flavour very quickly, which is why the water changes colour almost immediately. But they also release tannins more aggressively. When you squeeze a bag full of fine particles, you're pressing out the strongest, most bitter elements trapped in those tiny fragments. That's why squeezed tea often tastes rough, even when brewed for the correct amount of time. And this habit usually develops as a form of compensation. If the water wasn't quite right, if the milk went in too early, if the brew feels weak, the squeeze becomes the solution, but it doesn't solve the underlying issue. It just alters the flavour profile in a way most people mistake for improvement. A properly brewed cup should never need force. The flavour should already be there. It's all about how long the tea is actually left to brew. Brewing for the wrong amount of time. Time is the one part of tea making most people don't measure. Some remove the bag almost immediately, as soon as the colour looks right. Others leave it sitting in the mug while they walk away, answer a message, or butter their toast. In both cases, the decision is guided by habit, not by what the tea actually needs. And that's where the imbalance begins. Tea doesn't brew all at once. Extraction happens in layers. In the first minute, lighter aromatic compounds are released. These give tea its smoothness and subtle sweetness. As time passes, stronger compounds begin to dissolve. Leave it too short, and the cup tastes thin and watery. Leave it too long, and bitterness slowly takes over. The tricky part is that colour is misleading. A tea bag made with fine supermarket tea dust can turn water dark in under 30 seconds. That visual cue convinces many people the tea is ready. But colour develops faster than flavour. Removing the bag too early often produces tea that looks strong but tastes flat. On the other hand, leaving the bag in indefinitely doesn't make the tea richer. After a certain point, it only increases tannin extraction. That's when the tea starts to feel drying at the back of the throat. It may seem bold, but it lacks balance. The difference between underbrewed and overbrewed tea can be less than a minute, yet most people never time it. It's treated as instinct rather than process, and that's why the same tea bag can taste completely different from one morning to the next, even when nothing else changes. If this is already making you rethink how you prepare your tea, take a second to support the channel. Give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments how long you usually leave your tea to brew. It helps more than you might think, and it keeps these deep dives coming. Because even when the timing is right, there's another factor that quietly affects flavour before the kettle is even switched on, and it has to do with the quality of the tea itself. Using cheap, dust-grade tea without realising it. For most households, tea is bought automatically, a familiar brand, a supermarket own label box, whatever happens to be on offer that week. The assumption is simple: tea is tea. If it looks dark enough and tastes roughly right, it must be fine. But not all tea inside those paper bags is the same. Many supermarket tea bags contain what's known as fannings, or tea dust, the smallest broken fragments left over after higher grade leaves are sorted. These tiny particles are designed for speed. They release colour almost instantly. Within seconds, the water turns deep brown. It looks strong, it looks convincing. But speed isn't the same as quality. Because the leaves are so finely broken, they release tannins more aggressively and aromatic oils less consistently. The result is tea that delivers colour and bitterness quickly, but lacks depth and smoothness. It's why some cups taste bold at first sip, but feel hollow or slightly harsh afterward. This isn't necessarily a safety issue, it's a quality issue. Higher grade tea uses larger leaf pieces that unfurl gradually in hot water. That slower release produces layered flavour. It feels rounder, fuller, more balanced. But because those teas don't change colour as instantly, many people assume they're weaker, when in reality they're more refined. Supermarket packaging rarely explains this difference clearly. Phrases like rich blend or full-bodied appear on boxes regardless of grade. Most shoppers never see the leaves themselves. They never compare size or structure, they simply trust the brand. Over time, households adjust their brewing habits to compensate. They brew longer, they squeeze harder, they add more milk, they chase strength that the tea quality doesn't naturally provide. And because tea feels inexpensive and ordinary, few people question whether the leaves themselves might be the starting point of the problem. Even if you upgrade the tea, there's another mistake that quietly changes how that flavour is experienced. And it's something sitting in your cupboard right now. Using the wrong mug or cup. Most people choose their mug based on comfort, not performance. A favourite oversized mug that holds a proper amount. A thin china cup saved for weekends. A heavy ceramic one grabbed without thinking. It feels harmless. Tea goes in. You drink it, the mug simply holds it. But the mug influences temperature from the second the water is poured, and temperature directly controls flavour. When boiling water meets a cold mug, heat transfers instantly into the ceramic or china. That heat loss may seem small, but it begins lowering the overall temperature of the tea before extraction has even stabilized. A thin-walled cup absorbs heat quickly and then releases it just as fast into the air. A wide mug exposes more surface area, accelerating cooling. And as tea cools, its flavor changes. Hot tea suppresses certain bitter notes while enhancing aromatic ones. As it drops below optimal drinking temperature, those protective effects fade. Bitterness becomes more noticeable. The body feels thinner. The tea that tasted smooth 2 minutes ago now feels slightly flat or sharp. This is why some cups taste perfect for the first few sips and then seem to deteriorate quickly. The tea hasn't changed. The temperature has. Oversized mugs introduce another problem: dilution. Most tea bags are portioned for a standard cup size. When used in a very large mug, the water-to-tea ratio shifts. Even if brewed for the correct time, the concentration weakens. People compensate by leaving the bag in longer or squeezing harder, which brings us back to earlier imbalances. Bitterness without depth. There's also material density. Thick, high-quality ceramic retains heat once warmed, creating a more stable drinking temperature. Thin china cools quickly unless preheated. Glass mugs lose heat rapidly through both surface exposure and conduction. Each material changes how long the tea stays within its ideal flavour range. And this isn't about luxury or expense, it's about consistency. When the mug allows heat to escape too quickly, the tea becomes unstable. Flavour perception shifts mid-cup. What begins balanced ends uneven. Because mugs are chosen for familiarity or style, few people connect them to taste. They blame the tea, they blame the brand, they blame the kettle. Rarely do they consider the vessel itself. But even with the right mug and the right tea, there's another overlooked step that changes everything before the first sip. And it's something many households used to do without thinking. Not warming the cup first. This is a step most households stopped doing years ago. It sounds old-fashioned, something your grandparents might have done. Pour a little hot water into the cup first, swirl it around, empty it, and only then begin brewing. Today, most people skip it entirely. The tea bag goes into a cold mug. Boiling water follows immediately, and because everything looks normal, no one suspects a problem. But that cold mug absorbs more heat than people realize. When freshly boiled water hits a cold ceramic surface, the temperature drops instantly. It may only be a few degrees, but those degrees matter. Tea extraction is temperature sensitive. Even a slight drop during the first moments of brewing can alter how compounds dissolve. That early heat loss interrupts the most important phase of extraction. The first minute of brewing determines balance. If the temperature falls too quickly, flavour compounds release unevenly. The tea may develop colour, but depth suffers. It becomes thinner, less rounded, slightly dull. Warming the cup first stabilizes the environment. By preheating the mug, you prevent that immediate heat shock. The water remains closer to its intended brewing temperature. Extraction becomes smoother and more controlled. The difference isn't dramatic, it's subtle, but it's consistent. And consistency is what most people are missing. This step used to be common when tea was treated as a ritual rather than a rush. Now it's skipped in favour of speed. The kettle boils, the water pours, and the mug silently steals heat before the leaves have had a chance to do their job. Most people would never guess that a cold mug could weaken their tea. But once you notice it, the difference becomes difficult to ignore. And even if you correct everything so far, the water, the milk, the timing, the mug, there's still one final mistake that quietly undermines the entire process. Treating tea as routine instead of process. The biggest mistake isn't about water temperature, it isn't about milk, it isn't even about how long you leave the bag in. It's the way tea has quietly become automatic. For most Britons, making tea is no longer a decision, it's muscle memory. You reach for the kettle without thinking. The bag drops into the mug. Water pours. A quick stir. Milk done. It happens while you're replying to a message, watching the news, getting ready for work, or clearing the kitchen. Tea has become background activity, and when something becomes background, attention disappears. Tea is simple, but it isn't careless. It relies on sequence. The order of steps affects extraction. The timing affects balance. The ratio of water to leaf affects strength. Even small shifts, 10 seconds too long, slightly cooled water, distracted stirring, alter what ends up in the cup. When you treat tea as routine, you stop noticing those shifts. The kettle might be reboiled water from earlier, the mug might be cold, the bag might be squeezed aggressively because you're rushing. Milk might go in before the brew has stabilized. Each one feels insignificant, but together they reshape the entire experience. That's why many people describe their tea as fine rather than satisfying. It's hot, it's brown, it tastes like tea, but it rarely feels full-bodied, smooth, or properly balanced. And because tea is so familiar, people assume inconsistency is normal. Some mornings it tastes better, other mornings it feels dull or slightly bitter. The brand gets blamed, the kettle gets blamed, the water quality gets blamed. Rarely does anyone step back and consider that the process itself has been rushed. Tea was once treated as deliberate. There was a pause in it, a sequence of small but intentional steps. The kettle boiled fresh water, the cup was warmed, the leaves were given time, Milk was added at the right moment. Nothing was complicated but nothing was hurried. Today, speed has replaced sequence, and that speed removes control. When you slow the process down, even slightly, the difference becomes obvious. The flavour feels rounder, the texture smoother, the bitterness softens. The cup feels stable from first sip to last. It isn't about turning tea into ceremony, it's about understanding that the steps matter. Once you see tea as a process rather than an interruption, the cup stops feeling unpredictable. You stop compensating. You stop squeezing and adjusting and guessing. You start controlling it. Kindly give the video a like. It helps more people see it. And if you enjoy these deep dives into everyday habits we all think we understand, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.